Don't mind me. I'm trying to
Okay.
throw this ruckus.
All right, here we go. Salute to NBA Nation on this Friday afternoon here on the East Coast. NBA training camp is underway. Different teams kicking off media day. And as my guy Lil Murray says, man, October is here. It is time to get to it. And on today's show, we're going to take a trip around the West Coast, man, and dish on some of the teams in the spotlight. Lakers media day just yesterday. Redick getting a contract extension. Where do the Rockets go from here in the aftermath of the Fred VanVleet trade? And some teams to watch around the West. Obviously, this is OKC's thing to lose, but a lot of teams have retooled. And with the Rockets news, a lot of teams can be kind of reshuffling the decks out West, man. So we're going to get into all of that with Lil Murray, NBA insider for The Athletic. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. Salute to everybody on this Friday, man. All right, Law, how we feeling, man? How you doing today, man? Welcome back, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So, you know, you have a year under your belt now, fully transitioning from the Clippers to the NBA with The Athletic. What was that transition like?
Well, I'll say it definitely wasn't a year. I mean, I would say, and I don't want to say I'm transitioning away from any one particular team. Like I've been, the Athletic hired me to cover the Clippers, and after 2-3 years, it was pretty clear that I had more to offer than cover one team, and it's just an emphasis thing. It's like, let's lean into covering the NBA, not just saying, I'm a Clippers beat writer solely or even primarily. I've just been given more to do and more to think about every single year, and this next year is absolutely going to be a continuation of that.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, man. So, like we said, we definitely appreciate all the coverage and you joining us today. Now, yesterday you were at the Lakers media day. Lakers kicking things off. Rob Pelinka, Redick meeting with the media, and Pelinka dropped some surprising news that Redick was given a contract extension. What was the overall reaction to that? Because some people were saying, why now?
Yeah, it definitely got an eyebrow raised out of me. I mean, I gotta say it wasn't what I would call their media day, just because it was just the brain trust meeting with the media. It wasn't their players. It's not like what you've seen from, for example, the Nets, the Knicks, the Sixers, the teams that have international trips and, get a chance to start their camps early because they're going to be leaving the continent for a period of time. They'll still have their media day Monday where players will speak, and I don't intend to be there for that. So it was good for me to be around for Pelinka and Redick. The Lakers have not exactly valued head coaches over the years. We knew that when JJ got the job. They fired a guy in Darvin Ham who took a play-in team to the conference finals in his first year as an NBA head coach. And then after year two, they fired him. Frank Vogel won a championship with the Lakers in his first year as head coach. By the end of his third season, he was fired. So, and this goes way back. Pretty much if you take Phil Jackson out of the equation, look at the last quarter century of Lakers head coaches, they've all had incredibly short shelf lives. I think contract extensions are just PDA, you know what I mean? That's all they are. It's a way to show your coach that they're appreciated, at least in the moment, so that when things change, they can at least say they got their bread. We have seen, shoot, Frank Vogel got a contract extension. How much was that worth?
Right.
Not like in terms of money, but in terms of actually keeping his job, right? But I do believe that the Lakers have done all that they can. They realize that Redick's value as a head coach goes beyond whatever his X's and O's are, even his relationships. There is a sense of that guy is in a post that crosses over what you typically ask for from head coaches, and that's a credit to JJ. I don't mean that to be any kind of shade whatsoever. Like, if you have a coach who you feel like is a star, even if the results are pending more than they are actually realized, I think that that's a valuable thing for a franchise because think about what franchises do. They put head coaches in positions to be politicians, to be figureheads, to be a reason for paying fans to support the team and at most show up to the arena. If you look at like an NBA game, CP, I feel like if you were to put a timer on how many sideline shots and close-ups of reactions of a coach, it's not equal, is it?
Yeah,
There's some coaches who's like, oh man, I gotta see what Spo and Steve Kerr looking like on that sideline. You ain't saying that about Brian Keefe in Washington,
yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Like you had Knicks games. Part of the experience is looking at Tom Thibodeau and
yeah.
how much of a frown that he has. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the head coaching position in the NBA. They could be stars. Not all of them are. You're hoping JJ gets there, and the Lakers are basically saying after the year he had and after the and with the Q rating that he has, the connection that he has to the game, to the fans of the game, we're going to actually make it a point of emphasis to be stable in this position, something that they have not exercised over most of this 21st century.
Yeah, and I think based on where they are, it makes the most sense. And to me, hiring him last year kind of signaled that they were going to be in this a little for a long term project with JJ Redick, clearly believing in his potential to really elevate this franchise. And they're in a tricky spot right now in the West where they're kind of in that in between phase where, yes, with LeBron here and Luka, they want to say that they're going to contend, but they're also in this tricky gray area where obviously they are transitioning from LeBron, and in doing so, looking for some stability somewhere while they figure out how the chairs move around with the roster.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Luca. I got a I got a story that hopefully will be out before the end of the weekend. But the point guard position with the Los Angeles Lakers, if you really think about it, it's Derek Fisher, and then who else has actually been stable in that position? They've had retreats,
Yeah.
they've had future Hall of Famers, they've had high draft picks, and it's rare that you find those dudes sticking around beyond year three. Like it's been a revolving door. Now Luka Doncic falls into your lap, you extend him, he's in his prime. There's a reasonable chance that we haven't seen the best version of him yet.
Yeah.
So now, in basically a year's time, the Lakers have signaled that, yeah, like point guard and head coach, we have not respected, keeping a stable, uh, tandem at those spots, your own court brain trust. And now, at the very least, they've identified two guys that they hope bucks that trend.
Which is why, look, I still give Redick credit going 50-32 that year. Yes, it was disappointing to lose to the Timberwolves in the way that they did, but all things considered, with the injuries that the team had sustained, with the LeBron cloud, and then trying to figure out how Luka Doncic fits into the equation, all while having no real center, look, I thought they did as well as they could, but, now it's, again, where are they in the competitive landscape of the West? Like, is the expectation from Blank these guys to truly contend, or do they understand that I don't see it that where they are in terms of being a true contender?
Man, they're the Lakers, so they're always going to pay lip service to contending. And the West was the Western Conference was weird last year, man, because the Houston Rockets were the 2 seed, the Lakers were the 3 seed. Neither one of those teams survived the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So they were closer to being middle of the pack teams than they were elite division champions, if you want to call it that. Like it was OKC and the rest. And that's not to say Oklahoma City clearly had their flaws as well because they were challenged in every playoff series they had, especially against the Denver Nuggets. I mean, the Denver Nuggets in turn They had to play a game seven on their home floor in the first round just to make it to OKC. The West is deep, but it's not like I wouldn't call it all these elite teams. The best teams, outside of Oklahoma City in the league last year were in the East. You know what I mean? You had two 60-win
Yeah.
teams in Cleveland and in
Boston.
Boston, the defending champions, and then you had two other teams that actually made it to the conference finals. One team fired their coach because they felt like their expectations was to break through to the finals, especially if they could knock off a team like Boston. The team that actually did make it to the finals, they were, an Achilles tendon away from possibly winning the damn thing.
Yeah.
Like the East should get more respect for their playoff viability. Whereas the West, it's a bunch of teams that they're regular season good, but damn, they are flawed. All of those teams are flawed. The Lakers are a part of a flawed group of teams that they're going to beat up on the teams they should. But when it comes down to it, do they have the optionality, a word that we heard often from Rob Pelinka Thursday? Do they have the optionality to beat teams that look differently, depending on a variety of factors? That obviously was a failure in the postseason this past spring. The hope is that the Lakers are a more complete team. I believe they are a more complete team, but are they going to be good enough to win a championship? And, you know, that is going to depend on factors that go beyond their best players.
Well, when you look at the top two, especially last year, and look at some of the Final Four, what those teams can hang their hat on is having multiple options of shot creating, playmaking to a varying degree that you can rely on. With the Lakers, and look, this is not an easy thing to do. They just still have not been able to transition from an over reliance on LeBron James in saving them. And look, he's over 40, and he's been showing miracles, but eventually Father Time is going to stop him dead in his tracks eventually. So, it's very interesting to see where the roster is composed and whether or not they truly have that roster versatility. But now I'm looking at a guy like an Austin Reeves. He bet on himself. He's going into this thing looking for a major deal. The question is, can he put his play where he wants his money to be?
Man, Austin Reeves is a guy who he makes the Lakers special. I think for all these teams, you identify who your best player is and who the main help for that guy is, the guy who takes the most pressure off. But elite teams have the third guy who could be the guy. And Austin Reeves, man, he had games last year where he punched fools. Like, I think about the Pacers game. ESPN decides they're going to broadcast that game in Los Angeles because they thought Luka was going to make his debut for the team. He doesn't play, and LeBron doesn't play. And again, I just had finished watching the Pacers come back from down 20 to beat the Clippers only a couple nights earlier. This was the night of the trade deadline. So, you get a Saturday, I like to say Saturday morning. You know how matinee games are, man. They might not start until 12:30 local time, but them boys is in the gym 9 o'clock in the morning. That's how I feel, right? And so like Austin put up like 40 plus on them dudes as the number
45.
one guy, as the guy who had to get those buckets for the team to win. Offensively, the Lakers have a luxury, and the luxury is they have three guys that they can basically play through. Before the Luka trade and after the D'Angelo Russell trade, that was Austin Reeves as the point guard for the team. And obviously you have LeBron. Offense is going to be interesting. You can't say it's going to be automatically great. We saw the playoffs. We saw that they didn't have an interior option. They still had these three guys. I thought that, man, like I saw Luka in the conference finals again with the Mavericks against the Timberwolves. Like he's going to bust their ass. And Luka got his numbers. Dudes got their numbers. But when it came down to getting buckets when they needed to, they didn't do it against a team that we saw was inconsistent in clutch time all year in the
That's right.
Timberwolves.
Yeah.
So, when you have mouths to feed, it's on the coaching staff to delegate that so that it optimizes the team and it's not just, oh, look, three guys who get numbers. Are the sum of the parts greater than, is it the whole greater than some of the parts? That's one. And for two, um, you mentioned Austin Reeves and Luka and LeBron. Offense is not my primary concern because those guys are so good and instrumental offensively, though. They're food on the other end of the floor.
That's right.
And
That's
that's
right.
NBA basketball. How well can you defend with a consideration that some guys are going to play a lot of minutes because those are the guys or your best players or who you play through. If you have to be able to protect those guys defensively, that's a lot of minutes for those
It's a lot of guys.
dudes, and that's to me that's the concern with the Lakers going into next season.
Yeah, where especially when you have the elite teams, they may have one, most likely no holes defensively in that starting unit, or the guys that log heavy minutes. You got a Laker team where you're looking at potentially three there, so that could be a little bit tricky. Now, as we look at a team who coming into this thing earlier in the offseason, defensively was their stronghold. In the Houston Rockets, they go out and get Kevin Durant to shore up their late game closer situation and to improve their shooting, their offense all around. But then you lose Fred VanVleet. Where were you on the Rockets standing prior to the VanVleet injury, and where are you now?
Yeah, so I did power rankings twice since the regular season ended last year. I did it right after the finals, and I did it right after summer league. And shout out to the Athletic for not making me do any more than that. Like I'm not a big off season like guy in terms of repeating stuff. Like I
Yeah,
believe in, the theory of the off season. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
I was not especially high on the Rockets either time. I think I purposely kept those dudes out my top five. I gotta go look at it, but my thing with the Rockets was it's like what I said to you earlier. Yeah, they were the two seed, but that doesn't mean they felt like your typical two
Typical.
seed.
Yeah.
They felt like a team that was closer to the middle of the pack. The first round of the playoffs bore that out. They were fortunate to earn a game seven against the seven seed Golden State Warriors, and then they never really gave themselves a chance to win that series. So um, Fred Van Vliet was a major catalyst from the Rockets being the worst team in basketball to begin this decade, the immediate post James Harden era, to fostering a culture change. You got to change culture before you can expect to win games. That's how it should be. Some teams they get it mixed up. They win games, but they don't got their soul right. Fred VanVleet's a winner. He's a competitor. He's a guy who it's not about his numbers. It's about how he impacts the guys that he's in the locker room with. He's an outstanding leader. He's a champ. I feel horrible for him.
Yeah.
To tear his ACL, the silver lining, and I don't like always doing this because I don't like equating. I remember when Terrell Owens was going through some real shit when he was with the Cowboys, and his publicist was like, Terrell Owens has 48 million reasons to feel like himself, and it's like you don't equate a man's bread with his heart and his
Happiness.
head. You know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That being said, I'm glad Fred got he got his money first.
Right. Right. Right.
He got his money, but they're gonna miss him. They don't have. This was the team that passed the ball the least in the NBA last season. Okay, and they just lost the guy who passed the ball the most on that team. There's not a clean replacement. I think people have educated themselves on the workings of the CBA that we're in.
Yeah.
Houston can't sign anybody to replace him. There's no street guy that they can bring on their team at any level. Okay, they have to wait for some restrictions to open up. The guys that they could trade, they're not going to trade. The guys that they might like to trade, they got to wait until mid-December at
Yeah.
the earliest. So they're going to have to throw some guys out there. There are two main takeaways I have. Number one, it's Amen Thompson time.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
watched
Yeah.
and paid attention to Amen Thompson prior to the NBA when he was at Overtime Elite, you know that he played with the ball in his hands. He's basically a point guard, and he is so versatile and so his skill set is such in a way where he didn't have to play point guard. I mean, he's basically playing the 3 and the 4 last year. I looked at him as the starting shooting guard, with the way that Houston was probably going to line up. I was anticipating Van Vliet, Thompson, Kevin Durant, Alperen Şengün, and a competition for that fifth spot, which I would have given to Dorian Finney-Smith just
Yeah.
because I felt like they were going to need more perimeter defenders, right? Someone to help Fred and help him in, because you don't want Kevin Durant guarding the
Doing
perimeter
everything.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I look at Jabari Smith as a better low man, rover, someone who you want helping protect the rim, helping to back up a guy like Şengün on that front. But that's kind of where Kevin Durant is at his best. Again, people don't link a defense as what guys are going to be asked to do. Well, now, I think defensively, they'll be all right. You can replace a small guard like Fred. Fred's a very good defender for a
Yeah.
small guard. You can find a guy, and Reed Shepard should be that guy. That's my second takeaway. Reed Shepard, you spent the number 3 pick on that guy.
Right,
You
right.
won a lottery and spent the number 3 pick on him. Reed had a terrible rookie year.
Yeah,
But
he did.
Reed Shepard didn't forget how to play basketball. Reed Shepard wasn't a bad prospect. He was the first guard picked in his draft for a reason. Well, now you drafted him with the understanding that, hey, Fred, he's good now, but Fred is over 30 anyway, and we're going to have to eventually understand how we're building this team. They don't have the luxury of waiting anymore with a guy like Reed Shepard. I would start him, call him the shooting guard if you want to, put the ball in the men's hands, and then ask Reed to do what he did at Kentucky, which is, if you looked at his tape at Kentucky, that guy was very active. He's a savant in terms of making plays on the ball. He's not a big guy, but he's an outstanding athlete for a small guard. You can't say that about Fred VanVleet. I think Houston should be okay defensively. It's the offense that it's like, y'all don't have a lot of depth from the ball handling and playmaking standpoint.
Right. And it was already, to me, it was already in question even after getting KD. I'm like, all right, they're there, but I still think they need maybe one more vet to help offensively. And now, you bring in KD. Obviously, he's on the other side of 30 with the mileage, with potential lower extremity injuries that you have to pencil in over the course of an 82-game season. So, losing Van Fleet, you're second in command there from a vet standpoint and a champion. That's major for them, especially on the offensive side. So I'm with you in that. This year, at least for the half a season, is really going to be an evaluation period where we were front row for the Amen Thompson experience last year, but in a different role. Now they're most likely put the ball in his hands a little bit more. Maybe they run some more offense through KD, but hey, for Reed Shepard, now is the time. He had a good summer league. Last year, as you said, the season wasn't too kind for him. Now is where they see, what he's made of. But I also think when they brought in KD, they had the cachet they had the arsenal to make the trade worthwhile, right? It was worth a gamble. You had a lot of extras there that you can part with. Now to replace Van Fleet, it gets a little bit trickier to say, okay, if we're going to trade a Tari Eason, if we're going to trade a Reed or one of our younger players plus more draft capital, does that get us past OKC or the rest of the pack in the West?
Man, and that's where the issue is. I feel like Houston is going to be an incredibly stoppable offense. Like, they only ranked as high as they did last year because, in terms of offensive efficiency, because they were the best team in the league when it came to the possession battle. And again, there are two things that you consider with the possession battle: the turnover margin and the offensive rebounding margin. They crashed the boards. Horrible shooting team. So they knew they were going to be bricks. And they were like, we're flying in and getting as many of these as we can. The Rockets beat you last year because they took significantly more shots than you last year. Because their point guard, even though Fred is absolutely part of the problem when it comes to, low efficient scoring output. Like Fred, I think he was far below 40% from the field.
He didn't crack 40.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. But what is acceptable is Fred took care of the basketball. And on the other end, Fred would turn you over. Amen would turn you over. Tari would turn you over. Dylan Brooks would turn you over. They had guys who helped them make sure that, hey, we might not shoot better than you, but if we shoot more than you, it's like a football game. If I got the football for 35 minutes of a game and you only got it for 25 minutes, you probably going to be under a lot more pressure to do something with your offensive possessions compared to the team that is holding the ball and you're probably moving the ball. You might not be very efficient. You might get in the red zone and crap out more often than not. But if I got the ball more than you, that's putting a lot of pressure on you to do something with your limited time. The philosophy of the Rockets should be the same: win the turnover battle, win the offensive rebound battle at all costs. You're hoping that Kevin Durant gives you a chance to win those games late when you need buckets to say, hey, I need a mid range pull up. I need to draw a double team, something like that. I need a guy who can make a three if someone else creates a shot. They should be playing through Şengün, honestly, more than KD, because
True.
Şengün is probably a little bit better of a passer than Kevin if you really look at it. But the big issue is to get through a regular season, you need depth. They have major compromise their depth right now to get Kevin, a guy who, as you mentioned, Kevin's going to miss more games than a guy like Jalen Green. So your ceiling is higher, but the floor actually might be a little bit lower. And in the West, that's a big consideration because, again, in the West, you don't have the luxury of taking nights off. If you're not your best, even the teams that might not even make the play-in tournament, they might give you a run for your money.
Yeah, that is true, man. And speaking of the team that knocked the Rockets out of it, you have the Warriors. And, man, it seems like all season we're talking about Jonathan Kuminga one way or the next. And now it's decision time for him in that qualifying offer. Will the two sides come to a deal? Is he going to get traded? They have until October 1st to make that decision. How do you think the Kuminga saga finally plays out, man?
I mean, I'm just glad it's going to be over.
Yo, me too, man. Me too, man.
It's asinine that this is the player who is holding up all the business for the Warriors.
Yeah.
Guys have told me that they had to wait for decisions to be made on what is going to happen with them because of the domino effect of this one team that literally can't sign guys until they, resolve the situation with the restricted free agent. A restricted free agent that wasn't even in their playoff rotation
right
by the end of the first round. Think about that. Like, that's who we're talking about here. I feel like I don't know how this is going to go because a team, we keep hearing the Kings being interested in acquiring Kuminga, which, again, why?
Yeah.
If there's one thing I can say the Kings don't need, it's another guy who needs touches. Like, the Kings have a surplus of players like that already, and so it's a lot to consider, man. The Warriors, I get it. They're in a tough spot. This is a guy who was on a championship winning team, a guy that you spent a top 10 pick on, a guy that's popular with the front office and ownership more than the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Clearly doesn't fit the way those other guys have to play. You don't want to lose a guy for nothing. It's very complicated. It does make sense as to why it's gotten to this point. It's just very unfortunate that it did. And so I again, a trade just seems, especially with that team, it seems weird. It doesn't sound like the Warriors want to trade him to Sacramento specifically. I just see this being, look, sign the qualifying offer, get these guys in camp. You got a big season to prepare for because that team, you talk about a team that doesn't have a lot of margin for error. Their three best players are all 35 and older.
Yeah. Yep.
They talk about the Clippers as the unction. The Warriors don't even have a full out roster, and their best players are poor locks to play a respectable number of games.
When you look at this situation with Kuminga, I often wonder who is it to blame for this impasse here? Because I see a player who, like, for example, is it on a Steve Kerr for devaluing him? Because we're at a point where he could sign the qualifying offer and then most likely walk because he wants nothing to do with him. He could sign the deal that they're offering him where a team like that's trying to manage the cap responsibly, maybe they're feeling like, okay, is this a slight overpay here? Or do they make a trade him to a Kings team who, like you said, why would they even want him? And not too many offers for him. So it's like, who's to blame for where his value is right now, where you don't even know who he really is as a player?
I don't like getting too much into blame game stuff, but I'm gonna go outside the box, CP, and say this is on the front office. They knew they Steve Kerr won championships as a head coach with a group of players that are very identifiable. The front office screwed this up before. James Wiseman was the number 2 pick in the draft, and they were like, "Yeah, we need a center." And then they were like, "Oh wait, we devalue centers every chance we get and win championships
Yeah.
because of it." Like we you can't have the lore of the death lineup and Draymond Green as the center of those lineups, and then try and continue to stick a round peg in a square hole. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like that's what Kuminga is. The coach is going to do what he needs to do to win games on a day by day basis, not prioritize one player on his team who is not the most important player on his team just to satisfy a draft status or a potential contract negotiation. The coach's job isn't to do that. It's to win games. The players, their job is to be the best players that they can be and contribute to winning. The front office, their job is to generally manage. Like,
Yeah.
so if you looked at this whole situation from the time you drafted a guy to the time you gotta make decisions on third year option, fourth year option, all of those things. If you see what's happening, you tried to pump and dump. You try to be like, he's our future. Turn around the next month and not only acquire Jimmy Butler, but give him the contract.
Yeah.
And we know Jimmy wasn't your first choice
That's
either
right.
because KD had to hit y'all on the side, being like, hey, just so y'all know, we ain't doing this
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on, man. That is all from owners. Owners are rich fans. They are happy to be there, but also have way more money than any of us. Like anything an owner says on basketball matters, it's like the best thing an owner can do is be a fan. Be off to the side. Hire those people that are great at the jobs they're supposed to do. Give them the check to let them do it, and then just be a great steward of your organization. I won't put this on ownership for being fans of a player that, they've gotten to know. It's on the front office. That's your job. Your job is to lead. And your job is to assess these things. Your job is to anticipate what might happen. Well, if they anticipated that they weren't going to have more than 9 standard contracts resolved less than a week before training camp, then I guess that's okay. I don't think that was the plan, CP. So we got to put it on the front office.
Yeah, that's fair, man. Well, October 1st, we'll see what happens with the Kuminga saga, but I'm with you, man. I'm ready for this to be over with. It's going to be interesting to see how the Dubs fare in a loaded but flawed, as you said, Western Conference. Now, as we look through the conference, obviously, surprises can happen on this day of last year. For example, New York Knicks and Timberwolves made a pre-training camp splash and bringing Karl Anthony Towns to New York, Julius Randle to the Timberwolves. When you look at the West, is there a trade candidate that you're looking at that could potentially be on the move?
Man, the Western Conference is such where anything can happen in any given time. You think you have a good team to start a season, and then it hits the fan,
Yeah,
and you're not that team no more.
yeah.
You know, uh, I'm interested to see what happens with Zion Williamson.
I
I
was just
really
gonna say
am.
that. I was just gonna say that.
Because that guy, I don't know, man. We got Ozempic Zion now.
Yeah, he's
I don't
looking
know
very
what to
svelte,
make of it,
man.
man.
Yeah,
And so it's like my man's like, where my cover at?
yeah, yeah.
That team just hired a new front office. You know what I'm saying? It's not great when the dude that drafted you and paid you lost his job almost mainly. What's the headline?
Yeah.
The guy that we believed in the most wasn't able to be the guy who can say we are doing the right things as an organization. So that's why you fire, and change over your front office. Joe Dumars is not beholden to anybody. He's not beholden to anybody there. And so, you know, what if Zion plays well and the Pelicans aren't winning? And you're like, you know what we can do is sell high. You know, um, Zion's a strange player to try and get on your team in the middle of the season. Um, but I'm interested to see what happens there because this isn't like previous Pelicans teams. I was excited to see the Pelicans play basketball this time a year ago. I thought they could be a top three seed with all the pieces. I didn't like the fit as much. I was like, this is weird. Someone's not going to start. Someone's, who is supposed to be the center on this team. But I was like, look at the talent that they had. They had DeJounte, they had CJ, they had Brandon Ingram, Zion, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones. They had pieces,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, that you were like, I want to see what Willie Green does with this group of guys. People love talking about the scam that is positionless basketball. Like, okay, then let's see it. You never saw it, CP.
Never saw it.
You never saw it. Those dudes never played a game together. There was never a game, 82 games, that all those guys that I just mentioned
That
were
is
active and
crazy.
available at the same time. And now that team doesn't exist anymore. Brandon's gone. CJ's gone.
Crazy.
DeJounte tore his Achilles. Trey and Herb are recovering from all-season surgery. I anticipate that they'll be ready to start the season. But, it's the same thing with the Pelicans. They're never fully whole. And now the team that they are now with, skinnier Zion is not the team that you would have wanted to see that skinnier Zion lead and play for. That's what's unfortunate. The era where the Pelicans had special rosters, that time is over. And now everyone's under pressure. Willie has his job for now, but we know that, they start 5-15, what happens? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
And he was once upon a time, one of the darling coaches of the league with a
That's
major reputation. So it's crazy how things just change in a drop of a dime. 1 minute they're playing, Cinderella team, and next minute they're just in a team in the tailspin right now.
Yeah, and that's what's unfortunate. They're in the West. They're the team that you can't be surprised if they knock guys off early in the season and compete and win. That's what you're going for. That's why when you start a team, you get these media days. You tell people, we're trying to win. You have training camp. We're trying to change how we're playing, understand what our identity is, and establish that identity and maintain that identity. You don't know what you can do. It's like the attitude your team has if you get off to a surprise start might take you through the whole season. I watched it with the Clippers last year. People had no expectations for that team for a variety of reasons. They get off and they survive their first quarter of the season, and all of a sudden, guys start to be like, "Oh, we belong here." It wasn't just talk. We believed, but we still needed to validate the belief that we had in this room. You know what I'm saying? It goes both ways. If you believe in yourself, but then you get off to a bad start, you're not coming into the gym with the same confidence. You're not coming into the gym with the same sense of urgency. You thinking, I mean, we let's see how this first 5 minutes go, but if we down, bro.
Yeah.
It changes things. I'm very interested to see how that first quarter of the season goes for the New Orleans Pelicans
Yeah.
and for Zion Williamson by extension.
Likewise, I just the Dumars, the move for Derek Queen and trading the pick for next year with Zion there. They have Eves Missy there. It just seems kind of clunky right now, which is why I would have to think that he could be on the plank there. Look,
Hey, that's the other part of it,
yeah,
CP. They drafted Derek Queen as if there was no other priority. We need to
right,
get Derek. Forget next year's lottery pick.
yeah,
We have identified that guy. You know who Derek Queen plays like? Zion Williamson.
that's right.
That guy, when it comes to body type, when it comes to ball skills, when it comes to, I don't know who the heck he gonna guard.
Yeah,
That guy,
same
that's the
questions.
same position. I'm sure Derek Queen and Zion could play together, but I'm also sure that if you prioritize a guy to the point where you are putting your pick at risk like that for another team to benefit, you got to be thinking, hey, what if we're drafting the replacement of our best player?
Right. Right. Something to watch. Head scratcher, but certainly something to watch. As you look around the West, we've talked about a lot of teams. Again, obviously OKC is the top dog. What other teams are on your radar this year as it relates to the pack out West?
Man, there's only one team that, people are finding excuses to sleep on in the West, that they shouldn't, and it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. Those dudes brought it. We're talking back-to-back conference finals, and this, man. Teams that don't have the franchise lore, they don't have the decade after decade relevance. People find reasons to say like they're not going to be the team that they shown themselves to be. They're waiting for the first excuse just to not pay attention to them. I hate it when people be like, the NBA is so much better when Team X is good, because it's an implicit statement to say that the league ain't as good when Team Z is good. That's how I hear these things. And maybe it's because I'm cynical and because I'm from Philadelphia that I hear that. I'm like, they ain't never say that about the Sixers. The league ain't better when the Sixers are good. The league just happens to be, okay, I guess the Sixers are good now. Let's wait until the process starts again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Minnesota has earned the right to be considered a team to be reckoned with. They have a literal MVP candidate in his prime. Dude got Ice-T to make commercials for him. Okay? He is a star, and you have people trolling and saying he'd be even more of a star if he was playing in one of our preferred media markets. That shouldn't be how the NBA looks at this. I watch so much NFL football. Do you care who is playing for Los Angeles? No, because people in Los Angeles don't care about the NFL teams in Los Angeles.
That's right.
If you're good, you're good. If you play quarterback and you are an MVP candidate, you put your city on the map. You are all of a sudden a guy that transcends all of that. Anthony Edwards should be that guy, because we have not seen the best version of Anthony Edwards. It's the same thing with Luka, but Luka has a couple years on Ant. Anthony Edwards is a guy who has gotten valuable experience, not just busting that legendary ass in the playoffs, but the way he has lost has given him a chance to take seriously how close he is to having the league in the palm of his hands. And I ain't just talking about marketing and face and, all of that stuff. That stuff doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, what are you doing to improve your game to make yourself and your team that much more of a problem? You mentioned this time last year, the Timberwolves and Knicks made a blockbuster trade at a time where, the most tapped in people could anticipate such a thing, but it was still jarring. It was way more jarring for the Timberwolves than the Knicks. The Knicks were like, we don't have a center. Julius just had shoulder surgery. Jalen Brunson emerged and was that dude. We might want to move Julius. Anybody want to? No one was thinking Minnesota was going to tap the eject button on Karl Anthony Towns the way they did. That disrupted Minnesota's psyche pretty much the entire season before the All-Star break. It was the opposite effect for the Knicks. The Knicks took off and they pretty much were like, hey, we can't beat the best teams in the conference, but we gonna do everything else. The Knicks, they did not get better over the course of the year. Once teams got to get used to their five-man starting lineup, it was like, oh, y'all net rating ain't looking like it was back in the fall. Minnesota, once Julius missed some time and got over his damn self and got back healthy with Rudy Gobert, that team started to take off a little bit. They survived the play-in tournament. They were looking like a play-in tournament for sure. Minnesota has an opportunity to do what they did the year before, to validate that they belong and to take the next step. And if they can do that, they are going to be a problem because they can defend. They have depth. They have shooting. They have real talent at the top. And they have guys who, instead of last year, a bunch of guys not being able to talk to each other because they're moody and because that was the team that they had, especially breaking camp. Now it's, hey guys, we won together. We knocked off the Lakers. We knocked off the Warriors. We don't need to apologize for knocking off. It's not our fault the Lakers didn't have a center. It's not our fault that the Warriors forgot how to play basketball without Steph. Minnesota shouldn't be apologizing for that. They shouldn't be apologizing for us raising them to a level where we think that they could possibly be the team that comes out the West next year.
Yeah, I think they're a team certainly on the radar who I'm interested to see. Are they going to kind of get over those war wounds and make it to the next level? I was a little disappointed in their showing it against OKC and losing in that gentleman's sweep. But
Hey, I wasn't disappointed. I thought they were going to get their ass kicked,
you
and
thought,
they did.
I thought they would have gave them because of the defense, and as you
Hey,
said,
hey,
I
and
thought
what
they
was
would've
that
gave them a better
game?
run.
They beat them Bulls by 43 points.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
wait, let me go look up. I ain't never seen a team survive a loss like.
Right.
But OKC was just that good. But they were that flawed, and Minnesota was that good too. Minnesota just couldn't tap into it. Now you want to see, hey, when you play in the playoffs, you know what I saw? Luka Doncic literally turn Rudy Gobert into the spinning top that you see under a Christmas tree during the playoffs. We talked about it all summer last year. Luka saw that same team, and he had LeBron as a co-star. And what happened? Minnesota was like, "I got something for you, right?"
Yeah.
What's stopping Minnesota from saying, "Hey, we got gentlemen swept by the Thunder. If we see them boys again, it's gonna be different." They beat the Denver Nuggets, man, when they were conference, like the Nuggets were the defending champions. No one expected that. And then guess what? Minnesota was like, we got something for y'all, Denver. We will sweep y'all. They didn't lose to the Nuggets one time last year. Okay?
True.
Like, that was a big reason Michael Malone got fired. You remember that game?
Yeah.
And, towards the end of the season when Russell Westbrook flies out, fouls and kills Alexander Walker, free throws, overtime, game over. I mean, Minnesota, look at their team. Look at who they can play against. They beat themselves in a ton of games last year. Like, that stuff can turn around, man.
Yeah. And I like what I'm hearing out of there. You had Ant-Man. He was focused. He wanted everybody out there getting ready in the off season. John Krasinski out The Athletic just wrote a great breakdown right up on Julius Randle, very introspective, and says it's the happiest he's been. So we'll see if he carries that further. And I like the bench dogs that they got, man, with Shannon Jr., with Dillingham, and I forget the name of the other guy.
Jalen Clark. You got to put Jalen Clark in that mix.
Yeah. I like the dogs that they have coming off the bench. But you mentioned somebody in Gobert. And with the deal, Naz Reid just got his bag. He just got his deal. Do they keep Gobert going forward, knowing that you invested all this in Naz Reid? Do you see an eventual transition here where, it's Naz Reid getting bumped up to that 5 spot? They go a little bit smaller with Reid and Julius.
I don't think they would want to do that until Jan Behringer is ready. That was a hell of a first-round pick. And that's a first-round pick. They got that pick from New York because New York got that pick from Detroit.
That's right.
It was very interesting that Detroit, they picked last year to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, bro, just so you know, we're not getting the 5th pick in the draft this year. We gotta find a way. And they found a way. I love it when teams do that. They're like, hey, why don't we make the playoffs this year and see what happens? Hey, that pick was 17th overall. They used it on a young French center. When Johan Behringer can show that he can be the guy as far as the rim protector, because Naz Reid's a different player.
Right.
Naz Reid is valuable because when you need him to play the 4, he can play the 4. When you need him to play inside, he can play inside. When you need him to play outside, he can play outside. I love Naz Reid's defensive effort in the playoffs. Naz is not known for being a defensive player. That dude, when he was guarding Luka, he competed. That's what it is. I love basketball, man, because, basketball gives you an opportunity to establish one thing, and then guys will say you can't do something, and then it's plain as day. We're going to see it, especially in the playoffs when it's like every game you're close to the end of somebody's season. It must not be yours. They need Behringer to show that he can learn as much as he can from Rudy. It's going to take a year, so I don't anticipate them moving off of Rudy anytime this year. But best case scenario for Minnesota, honestly, you're on the right track here, CB. Best case scenario is that guy, Johan Behringer, can show that he can be a guy who can be a legitimate starter as soon as year 2. There's no guarantee of that. Young bigs, it takes a while.
Yeah.
I think people need to understand that. But the best case scenario for Minnesota is that they can get to a place where they can move off of Rudy sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that was a nice way to luck into that draft pick, man. I got a chance to see him early in summer league. Very impressive. So as you said, his development will be something to watch with the Wolves, but they have enough right now to get it done. So we'll see how they contend out there in the West, man. Great show though, man. Definitely appreciate all the time and insight. This was definitely a great breakdown. What do you have? Anything coming up for the Athletic? What do you have to preview on the pipeline?
It's up to my editors, so shout out to them. Shout out to the Athletic. I got mad stuff in the works. I actually got a story up Friday morning, and that's looking at the Clippers and the fact that we've been talking about them because of this scandal, and we
Yeah.
haven't not been talking about the basketball part of it and the players having to speak on it, including Kawhi. So I hope people check that out, and you know we about to get ball for real, man.
Yeah.
I hate the off season, dog. Like, people be like just talking about paper, man. You know what happens to paper? You put that stuff on the street, turns dirty, the rain start falling, and it ain't as strong as
Yeah.
you thought it was, man. Let's get some real ball in the check.
What does your gut tell you though, man? With how this thing ends with Kawhi, based on everything we've heard.
My gut says that I should probably, put some steel in that John, because it's gonna be a minute before this all gets resolved.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think the NBA is going to do a thorough investigation here, but man, we'll see how it plays out. Well, once again, man, great job, man. We definitely appreciate all the time, and hopefully we can do this again as the season gets underway.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Law Murray, salute to everybody in the chat once again. Hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that the show's available in audio podcast format. No reason to miss it. We are available on all platforms. Salute to everybody in the chat for watching. Shout out